Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Tuesday, March 17th, 2015. Here are our top stories.
And tonight, you'll have some unexpected surprises.
Vote for me. I'm a fascist witch, criminal, not even a real liberal like Thomas Jefferson. I'm a total corporate fraud like McDonald's. I'm Hillary Clinton. I'm a piece of
Excuse me.
That's next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
These things must be done delicately.
Well, of course, Ebola was last year's news, correct? We should just move on. It's a finished story. Not exactly. We now have a health worker undergoing treatment today that has been moved from serious to critical condition in Maryland. And of course, they brought back last week 12 healthcare workers to the United States that were infected with Ebola. This Maryland patient is the 11th person with Ebola to be treated in the United States since last August. Of the first 10 people treated for Ebola in the U.S., 8 survived and 2 have died. And again, he is now in critical condition. They just downgraded that from serious condition. Now, to put this in perspective, for just healthcare workers alone, as NBC pointed out about 2.5 months ago, the count was nearly 500 healthcare workers dead from Ebola. The exact number is 838 sick and 494 dead as of January, the beginning of January. Now, to put that in perspective, that's about 5 times the number of people that had died total from previous Ebola outbreaks, the largest outbreaks previously. That's about 20 times the previous largest outbreak of number of people that have come down with Ebola. So this is a massive outbreak, even amongst healthcare workers who are exercising the most extreme care, who are following all the procedures given to them by the CDC and others. Still, we have about 5 times the number of people that have died from this as the previous worst Ebola outbreak. But we also learned today that in Amarillo, it's not just people being brought back to the United States, but we still have people coming into the United States that are perhaps bringing Ebola with them. We see that 2 people have now been put under watch in Amarillo. We have 2 patients that flew in from Liberia to Amarillo. They did not have any symptoms when they first came in, but now the mother and child have both developed fevers. And of course, as I mentioned before, the 12 workers who were just brought to the U.S. for treatment for Ebola are from Sierra Leone, where nobody is saying that it's under control. As a matter of fact, the vice president of Sierra Leone was put under quarantine about a week and a half ago. There's another connection to Sierra Leone, and that is the Tulane University experimentation on hemorrhagic fever was being conducted in Sierra Leone near where the outbreak began, around the time that it began. The government there suspected that perhaps it had gotten out of their laboratory by mistake or even perhaps deliberately. And they told Tulane to shut down their research and move out. Now we see in the United States, again, this developing story at Tulane University in Louisiana. We see that a deadly bacteria, Burkholderia pseudomallii, is now escaped from the lab there. They brought it to America. It's not indigenous to America. It's not endemic to America. They brought it here to study it. It's part of the CDC's Select Agents program to weaponize deadly bacteria. This has a 50% casualty rate in Thailand where it's endemic. They brought it here to weaponize it. They brought it here to create a vaccine at the same time. And of course, Allison Young with USA Today has been following this very closely. She's been following all of the problems at the CDC labs experimenting on deadly bacteria. Just last week, teams went back to the area to see if they could figure out how it got out of the lab. They still don't know, and to the extent to which it has spread into the environment. Local officials there are very concerned about this. And now we see that yet another person has come down with this. A worker not come down with any symptoms, but they show signs of having been exposed. At the end of last week, it was reported by USA Today that a worker at Tulane has possibly been exposed to the bioterra bacteria. They say new tests indicate that a worker at the Tulane National Primate Research Center near New Orleans has been exposed to the dangerous bioterra bacteria that was somehow released from a high-security lab onto the property, federal officials said Wednesday night. Now, previously, there was a U.S. Department of Agriculture inspector who went there initially to investigate the escape from the lab of that bacteria. She got sick the day after she visited there. But this is the interesting thing. They have maintained all along that she did not get sick because of that particular bacteria. They say, well, she's been in areas where she's been exposed to this bacteria all over the world. So that's probably what was behind it. What is interesting is that they never said that they tested for the particular strain, as they did with the 7 monkeys who got sick. They named the particular strain that they were experimenting on. They said these monkeys tested positive for that, so they knew that it was that same bacteria strain, but they never said that she tested negative. They also said she didn't say that she tested positive. It's also interesting that just prior to that, as the inspectors went back a second time to see the extent of the way that it had spread into the soil, perhaps into the environment, they're very concerned about that in Louisiana. As they went back, this is what the director of the center, Andrew Lackner, said. He said that testing and surveillance plans are still being developed, but he says he questioned whether the bioterror bacterium possibly was already naturally present in Louisiana's soil and water, but just hadn't been recognized because nobody had looked for it systemically before. He said in his community update last week, he wrote, quote, "The various Burkholderia species have been present in domestic animals in Louisiana since at least 2004, long before any scientific study of the organism began at the Primate Center." Now, as he's putting that out, I can get an image of some guy in a corrupt company that's being interviewed by 60 Minutes, sweating and lying behind the desk. He knows very well that this has never been endemic into Louisiana. He knows that they brought it in here, and if it's found in the environment, it's because it escaped from their lab. Just a couple of days before, the reporter from USA Today, Allison Young, had talked to Jay Gee, a CDC expert on Burkholderia pseudomallei, and told USA Today in an interview that the bacteria has never been found in nature on the continental United States. So there you go. They're trying to cover their tracks already. They try to pretend that the USDA inspector didn't come down with their particular strain, got it somewhere else, saying that this was something that was already here in the United States. It wasn't. It was brought here to the United States to be weaponized. It's called gain of function. They call these things select agents because they can be used as bioterror weapons. And they're developing a vaccine at the same time. But of course, we should not be concerned about vaccines. And of course, we should not have informed consent for things that the federal government has already removed liability from the pharmaceutical companies for. They have no liability for vaccines. That was removed in 1986. INFOWARS reports that the mandatory vaccine bill has now failed in 2 states. Those states are Oregon and Washington State. They failed last week. The Washington bill, which would have outlawed parents from citing personal or philosophical beliefs to exempt their children from vaccine requirements, failed in the State House on Thursday. A similar bill in Oregon, which would have also banned parents from using religion as an exemption, died Wednesday after its author, State Senator Elizabeth Steiner Hayward, said that she didn't have enough votes. Now, this, of course, is wording from Huffington Post. We need to not let them control the debate by controlling the terminology. It is not a personal belief exemption. It is informed consent. And that is sacrosanct if we're not going to have a medical tyranny, if we're not going to have people being experimented on for the greater public good as people were experimented on in Tuskegee, or as they were experimented on in the Nazi camps. That was something that was stressed with the Nuremberg trials and put into the Nuremberg Code. Informed consent is absolutely sacrosanct. But of course, Elizabeth Steiner Hayward is someone who had used her informed consent in her own personal case. And in a moving testimony, a lawyer pointed that out to her, that she had questioned her doctor, questioned the pharmaceutical recommendations for medication that she was taking as she was breastfeeding. She did her own research. She believed that it was not going to harm her child, and she ignored the advice of her physician, ignored the advice of the pharmaceutical companies. All we are asking for is that we have the right to inform ourselves and to understand what the risks are and to make that final decision ourselves. But she said that she's disappointed that the conversations have largely revolved around who is right or wrong about science and the benefits versus risk of vaccines, rather than about the health and well-being of Oregon's children. Look, the conversation needs to revolve around who is right or wrong about science. And the conversation needs to revolve around what the risks are. That is the essence of the conversation. Not that you can maintain that there is some nebulous risk to public health. Therefore, we all need to just shut up and do what the government tells us. That's not going to happen. A very good beginning, but there are still a lot of states. California is one. There's even bills here in Texas to try to put people on registers to try to take away informed consent. The fight is far from over, but a couple of battles have been won. Stay with us right after the break. We're going to have more mainstream admissions about how the FBI is behind every single terrorist attack, either as a false flag or creating mentally disturbed patsies. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
The knowledge of the ancients, tried and true, trusted herbs and extracts fused with the latest nutraceutical science. Introducing the all-new Ancient Defense Herbal Immunity Blend, crafted with over 14 key ancient herbs and extracts to supercharge and prepare your body for what experts admit is the most dangerous season of the year. We have rejected hundreds of other formulations in our quest to bring you what is simply the most powerful and comprehensive proprietary formula that we have ever created in the realm of herbal immunity. For the last 2 years, our team has been working with top doctors, nutritionists, and chemists to develop the ultimate nutraceutical formulation. Experience the benefits of combining over 14 ancient herbs and extracts with exciting new advances in nutraceutical science. For a limited time, get 25% off on this introductory offer. Visit ancientdefense.com or call 888-253-3139. ancientdefense.com. Used since before the days of the Roman Empire to support the body's natural systems and enhance overall health. Introducing the new INFOWARSLife.com oil of oregano formulation, a highly advanced nutraceutical form of this key herb that has been traditionally used by civilizations for thousands of years to promote health. We have now procured the most high quality and potent forms of oregano oil on the market, sourced from top leading manufacturers to ensure a concentrated level of bioactive ingredients, extracted directly from the wild herb and sealed in easy-to-use capsules. You will no longer need to endure the burning of liquid oregano on the tongue. Wild crafted from the Mediterranean oregano species that experts agree is one of the most powerful and most challenging to acquire. This winter season, it's more important than ever to secure this true form of oil of oregano. Now available in our limited first run at INFOWARSLife.com. That's INFOWARSLife.com or call 888-253-3139.
Well, as I've said many times before, the war on drugs is really a war of drugs, with our government supplying it as well as using law enforcement against it. The same thing is true of the war on terror, of course. It really is a war of terror, with our government running both sides. It's so obvious that mainstream media can no longer escape it. We have Dennis Kucinich as well as Rand Paul talking about how we were going to be al-Qaeda's air force in Syria. But of course, it goes far beyond that. Al-Qaeda was created as well as funded and trained by the U.S. government and continues to be so even today. Now, the New York Times is pointing out that the U.S. is giving al-Qaeda millions of dollars. They say the U.S. government says it has given al-Qaeda millions of dollars largely because of poor oversight and loose financial controls. There you go. That's a way to help them escape. See, that way they could admit what is eventually going to come out anyway and say, it wasn't malicious, it wasn't a conspiracy, it was simply incompetence. Look, the poor oversight and the loose controls are on the part of the American people who allow this gang called the CIA to run roughshod over everyone. And this is really CYA, cover your assets, for the CIA. As Kurt Nemo points out, details of the money transfer supposedly showed up in the papers of Osama bin Laden, who was, according to the official story, killed in 2010. They say that he was concerned that all of this cash that he was getting was perhaps contaminated with poison or radioactive contaminants. They were paying Osama bin Laden. He was their agent. And as he points out, this is from the Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction said, I am deeply troubled that the U.S. military can pursue, attack, even kill terrorists and their supporters, but that some in the U.S. government believe we cannot prevent these same people from receiving a government contract.